Welcome to Prescribing Prosperity with your hosts, John and Alex Soutsos from MedWealth Financial Services, operating through IPC Securities Corporation. In this podcast, we provide unique insights into wealth management, the psychology of financial decisions, and help listeners place the capital markets into perspective. Our aim is to help physicians, business owners, and other medical professionals to live their dream. Life is to live and enjoy, so we'll also cover health and lifestyle-related topics such as food, dining, travel, and unique experiences. Learn how global trends shape our investment strategy as we help you assemble your roadmap to prosperity.
Hello, and welcome to the Prescribing Prosperity podcast with your hosts, John and Alex Soutsos. Guys, good to see you again. I haven't talked to you in a while.
Good to see you too, Bill.
Hope
been too long,
everybody's
Bill.
good. Yeah, well, you know, you've had wind, rain, floods. You've had fires. Half of Canada has burned down since we last spoke.
Well,
Literally.
we can vouch we're still here.
Yeah, no, I see you. You have the opposite. You've had the opposite of fire problems in Toronto. You've had a little bit too much rain.
Yeah, we've had a lot of water, and the office is flooded, the basement's flooded. So we've been suffering some of the elements, but we're still here, and we're going to be able to talk today. I've moved into a temporary office space, as you can see. It's a little cluttered here, but we're making do.
That works. Making do is a good thing. Sometimes you just have to do that, which actually you have to do a lot regarding today's topic. I like this. I know we're going to get into having children, and there are lots of books out there. I threatened to write one after our first child was born about how there's just a lot of stuff nobody tells you about having kids. There is a woman out here, I've interviewed her, who wrote a book called It Gets Easier and Other Lies We Tell Our Moms.
At some point it has to, right, Bill?
Well, yeah, because we have to tell these lies because otherwise I don't think we procreate. If we knew the cost and difficulties and everything involved, we'd probably all just be like, no, we're not having kids, as a matter of fact. And then look what we would miss out on. So without further ado, let me turn this over to you, John and Alex.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank
Bill.
you, Bill. Well, as you mentioned, Bill, we're going to continue our series on financial planning for major life events, and the next major one after we finished our previous one, which was home buying, is going to be having children. And I actually just wanted to quickly mention, I think I'm not sure if we mentioned it during our previous episode, but in case we didn't, I just wanted to quickly say, in terms of financial thoughts on home buying, there are other costs associated with it in terms of home inspection, legal fees, and land transfer tax that are available or applicable for people here in Canada. So those are things that we're not going to get into too much today, but if anybody has any questions on them, they're more than welcome to call us, and we can discuss those in greater detail with them. But anyway, we will start by getting into having children. So having children is something that most people are going to experience at some point in their life.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, Bill, there's nothing that can ever prepare you for having a child. There's no book you can read.
There's nothing. The thing is, guys, if people told you, you'd be like, nah.
No.
It can't be that way.
No. You know what it is too, Bill? Like after you finish the first one, you think, okay, we figured it out. We can do this. Let's do it. Let's have a second one. And then because you think, oh, I figured out the routine. We did it with the first.
This is how mathematicians came up with the concept of exponential. That's exactly where exponential came from. Because it's like, it is not like we have one, now we have two. It's like, no, we have one. We may as well have 50 because it's so crazy.
One is like 1, 2 is like 4, 3 is like 9 kids.
Bill, it's economies of scale. It's an economics concept.
Oh yeah, sure it is, John.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're going to make it. I know we can reduce it to economics, and the part of what we're going to do today in the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things, or one of the important items that people often come across whenever they're coming into the discussion, the thought of having children is is your house large enough? So further to our previous episode, you've got to determine whether or not your home living circumstances are enough. And so that is something that is of the utmost importance, because you got to make sure that you have the space appropriate to house this child. You may be living in a studio apartment. Studio apartment's not really conducive for a child. As we've learned, my wife and I very recently, children come with a lot of paraphernalia. And if you have a lot of stuff in a very small amount of space, then you're going to very quickly feel overwhelmed. We live in a 3-bedroom, 3-story townhome, which when it was just the two of us felt very
Really
spacious.
big, right?
Yeah. Then we had one child. And then after one child, it felt like, okay, it's just about right.
Yeah.
Probably a little on the small side, but we can get by. And then with the second child, it feels like, okay, it's really small. It's
This is
really
starting
tight.
to feel kind of cramped around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I can tell you anecdotally, Bill, when my wife whispered in my ear one early morning while I was still asleep that she's pregnant with our second child, without opening up my eyes, I said, "We need a new house," or "We need a bigger house."
yes.
Yeah. So I knew it was an inevitability.
Hmm.
And when she whispered in my ear when when she was pregnant with Alexander, I said, "Oh no." My wife said if it was up to me, we'd never have children. I said I was waiting until I was ready.
Yeah,
But
there you
Because
go.
she asked me, when were you going to be ready? I said, I don't know. I still felt like a teenager.
I know.
And I was 30.
Yeah.
Well, no, I share that. I know the feeling. I never thought about having children, and I have 2 grown children who themselves are having children now. So,
Yes.
yeah, and you're right to your point, Alex. It's like you suddenly realize space matters.
Hmm. It does.
And it is the final frontier.
Yeah. You think about even something as simple as, just having like your own personal space as an adult at the end of the day, just when all the kids have gone to bed and,
Yep.
you just want a quiet, place to unwind. It's nice to be able to walk to the couch and not impale yourself on pieces of Lego or cars or any other paraphernalia. And you don't
Dinosaurs
appreciate it
laying
until it's
around in
gone.
between cushions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the housing consideration is a big one. The next one that I would describe as very important for people and something that they need to consider is the cost of all the paraphernalia that comes with it. You don't really when you decide that you want to have kids, a lot of people make the decision on the basis of, we're fairly stable, we have a good income, we're comfortable, we're young enough that it still makes sense to do it, we're going to have the energy to do this, and those are all important considerations. But I don't think a lot of people think about, okay, what are going to be the incremental costs? Assuming you're in a house that can house a child, we've already
Right.
crossed that variable. What are the costs of everything associated with a child? So cribs and furniture, depending on what you want to get, you can go to IKEA and you can get a very inexpensive crib, or you can get something that's more stable and is convertible into a long-term bed and furniture set for the child when they grow up, which is what we ended up doing. So if you want to do that route, that's going to cost you about $2,000 to $3,000.
Hmm.
You want to have baby monitors because you want to be able to keep an eye on your child and have some peace of mind. Well, depending on which baby monitors you're getting, that's anywhere between $500 and $1,000.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to interject an editorial note here that's inappropriate, okay? But your dad and I raised kids without baby monitors.
Yes,
So I view
Wow.
baby monitors as an optional cost, except nobody I know, including my kids, would dream of not having baby monitors, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough of the aside, go back to bassinets.
Well, I was just going to say we're now behaving like the government. We're watching everybody and everything in every room.
Yes.
Don't assume there's ever privacy. Just assume you're always being watched.
Exactly.
I actually thought about that the other day. Was when are we going to pull those cameras out of the room? Like, I can't leave those cameras in there when he's like 12 years old. Like, that's going to be weird. Anyway, yeah, that's another discussion. But you have the monitors. You have your like little pack and play, which is like your portable,
Yep.
whatever you want to call it, jail, if you will, for the children. Keep them locked up so they can't get into anything ridiculous. Or if you're on the road and they need somewhere to sleep, it's somewhere for them to sleep. You got your stroller, and holy crap, our stroller is expensive, as we found out. Like, there's strollers that cost as much as a used car. out there. So
It's stunning. For those of you who are listening who haven't bought a stroller in a while, just kind of like go online and take a look.
yeah,
Because wow.
it is not cheap.
You know what, the solution to all this is what the ancient Spartans used to do, and that is you stick the newborn on the side of the mountain, and if he survives overnight, he's going to be good, and then you'd never have to worry about him again. Just leave him on his own. He'll get by.
Darwinism at its finest.
Exactly.
But anyway, so there's that. There's diapers, which anybody who has a baby knows they go through a lot of diapers.
Oh,
There's,
yes, indeed.
There's clothing. There's bottles. There's baby proofing your house, putting up gates and whatnot to make sure that they don't get into anything. So that's one thing you'll soon realize if you have children who are very young is there's a lot that they can destroy or get themselves into trouble with.
Okay, Alexander, the population's already shrinking. We don't want to scare us into extinction.
One last one, car seats. That's another big one that people need to keep in mind. So car seats are another, $500,000. So I've just listed off probably, anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 worth of expense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you need to keep that in mind. There is the cost of maternity leave. So you may have a spouse who's on maternity leave. That means that spouse is not going to be getting their full income during that time. So that changes the calculus from your standpoint. There's childcare. Holy moly, is childcare expensive. If you have family members that are capable and willing to provide childcare for you, then that's obviously the best situation to be in. But when it comes to sending them to daycare, not only are the wait lists extremely long, where you're applying for the wait list usually between 2 and at least I would say 18 to 24 months out from when you hope that your child is going to be able to attend. Some cases upwards of 3 years. But the cost associated with daycare is enormous. The cost of a daycare here in Canada is approximately $15,000 a year. That's
a college education right there.
Exactly. An unregulated college or university education. That was my tuition when I did my finance degree at U of T. And that was an unregulated program. The regulated programs are $7,500 a year. But anyway, the point being that it's not an inexpensive consideration for people to have. And so you gotta, and to me, I have a hard time, just personally, this is not to say that other people can't do it, or people who make the decision to send their kids to daycare are wrong. Sometimes they have to. But I just had a hard time reconciling the cost of a university education being the same as daycare. But anyway, that's just
but the point being here, there's nothing anybody can do about that unless they are really entrepreneurial and they have a business idea to start a much less expensive daycare program, which I would encourage people to do, by the way. Yeah.
Let's increase the supply.
So you got childcare, you got that cost, then, which takes us to, and we already mentioned it, college. And college costs are getting, you've got a decision about private, non-private high schools, public schools. And then you've got the choice about what college and how much. It's
a little different here in Canada, Bill, because most of the universities here are the equivalent of state colleges in the States. And so we don't have the exorbitant private college fees that you deal
I applaud y'all for that. I hope it stays.
Well, I'm not so sure we applaud it, because there's a lot of people getting degrees in subject matter that is not moving the needle on anything.
That's a different deal.
And anyway, but it's still expensive regardless. And but you know what? It should be expensive. You should only be going to university if you're going to train in a field that is going to advance you economically and provide significant benefit to you financially. Because even when you and I went to school, Bill, we had that conversation with the professors first in Economics 101 in the lecture hall with 500 students. Is the opportunity cost of going to university worthwhile? And I would argue today that opportunity cost has gone up so significantly. People should be looking at alternatives, whether it is going to trade schools, being an entrepreneur. And I think the entrepreneurial route is probably a good route for a lot of people, because university today, I think, is somewhat overrated, depending on what you're studying.
I agree. That's something that I want to get into in more detail in just a moment. Before we get into that, I just wanted to dip back into the having a children before we get into the educational
Yeah.
side, Dad. Can you talk a little bit about life insurance for parents? Because that's
Ooh.
something that often comes up as a topic of interest to people who have kids for the first time.
So here's something interesting, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of insurance agents angry at me. But even though I have a license for the distribution of life insurance,
Yep.
it is not my bread and butter. It is a complimentary service that we offer due to the financial planning services. And what I find is people who have been exposed to a life insurance agent whose sole earnings come from insurance is they end up buying life insurance for their kids, which is to me crazy. I know the rationale. The rationale is it's a forced savings plan for the parents, but there's actually a life insurance element, and you don't want to. You want to insure liabilities. You don't want to insure assets. Sorry. You want to insure assets. You don't want to insure liabilities.
Thank you, John. I was like in my head thinking, wait a minute. There we go.
You want to insure your assets, not your liabilities. And children are financial liabilities. Regardless of how much you love them, they're financial liabilities, and it makes no sense to insure a child. So these convoluted, complex savings programs embedded in life insurance policies, I think, are something people don't need to worry about. We can take care of that in the investment realm in a more efficient, cost-effective manner. You want to insure parents, and as a general guideline, you want to you want to be able to replace the primary breadwinner for at least 20 years should they die prematurely, and that's with the assumption that if you die prematurely, at least the child is going to be able to grow up in a stable and financial environment and potentially go to post-secondary education and be able to afford it. So you take your annual income, you multiply it by 20, and that's a general guide. Obviously, you can go about it in a more detailed fashion and come up with more specific numbers. You also have to factor in the reality that we have inflation. And I know inflation was a benign financial factor for a very long time when it was hovering between 1% and 2%. But we've seen in the last few years how impactful inflation can be if it goes up. Even at 1% to 2% over 20 years, it adds up. So you're insuring today for 20 years and doing a 20-fold multiple of your income. Really, you probably need to be doing a 25 to 30 year multiple in order to factor in the inflationary cost at the end. So that is a general guideline for life insurance for parents. Term insurance is obviously significantly cheaper. You can get decent coverage today here in Canada for a male around 30 that's in decent physical shape is going to be running you in the range of what did we say, Alexander? $100, about $100 a month.
Yeah, about $120 a month. Like it's not substantial.
Yeah. It's not huge for $2 million of coverage, and the spouse, assuming they're of equal economic value, would have an equivalent expense. So that's what it would run you approximately.
The female spouse is generally a little bit less.
A little less, yes. Women live longer. Yeah, we know. Let's not remind everyone why we die early. Anyway, there's good reasons why men die early.
All three of us going early. Thank you, John. Really appreciate that.
Okay.
Reminder.
Well, that was Alexander who brought it up.
Do you want me to bring up our insurance for driving is also higher? But...
Go. Wait. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yes. Anyway, getting back to the facts here. So generally, 20 to 25 years is a general guideline. There's obviously, there should be a needs analysis conducted in a one-on-one situation, but that's a general guideline, and that's an expense that you can assume going forward. And you don't need to insure your children. They are liabilities. If you want a savings program, lots of good savings programs, registered educational savings plans here in Canada, or RESP for short. And you can do informal trust accounts, you can do formal trust accounts, and you can invest in the capital markets for those instruments.
Yeah, so that's actually a good segue because we wanted to get into the cost benefit analysis of those two options. So RESPs, registered education savings plans here in Canada, come provide with them some benefits. The primary one being there is some grant money that is available to you from the government. So for every dollar you put in, 20% of it is matched by the government up to a certain threshold.
Oh, nice.
So it's not bad. It
Keep
provides
in
a
mind the
little.
government's my pocket, my left pocket.
Yes.
It's coming from
But
my left pocket, going into my right
in the
pocket.
States, but just in perspective, in the States, there are 529 plans. So that I can set up, or any parent or grandparent can set up 529 plans for funding their kids' educations. The primary benefit of that is that it's tax-free.
Mhm.
But that's as far as anyone gets in terms of putting other money into it. There's not going to be another government agency or anything else
Yeah.
that will
Right.
match any of those funds.
Right. So we are fortunate that we have that degree of matching here. The other benefit of the RESP program is that you have the ability for the money to grow tax-free until it is withdrawn, at which point it is taxed in the hands of the child, assuming they take the money out while enrolled in a post-secondary institution.
Okay.
So the child can technically take out almost all of the grants within the first year of their education, and then they can withdraw the remaining amount of money all at once if they so choose. Now that would probably increase the likelihood that they're going to face a tax burden if they were to do that. But if you were to spread it over the lifetime of their university career, they would actually probably be able to stay, if not within, just above the minimum tax threshold in Canada. So which is about $15,000. So below $15,000 of income, you don't actually pay any tax.
Okay.
Above $15,000 of income, you do. And you start out in the lowest tax bracket. And so for the most part, it is a beneficial mechanism for the child to withdraw the income on a tax basis. Other than that, the RESP program has obviously some challenges as well. There's limits in terms of how much money you can contribute to it. There's limits to how much grant money is available. There are also a lot of rules and regulations that are too long and tedious to get into over the course of this podcast, but suffice it to say that when you're in the RESP program, it requires a greater degree of diligence to ensure that you are maintaining the rules of the program and not stepping outside them. Otherwise, there could be financial ramifications. Dad, do you want to talk a little bit about trusts?
Yeah, so the alternative to the RESP are informal trusts. So first of all, let's discuss what a formal trust is. You need three parties to a trust. You need a beneficiary, which is the child. You need a custodian, which is usually one of the parents, and you need a settler, the person who contributes the money. And that can be the father, or you can swap those roles between the parents. But there's usually three parties to a formal trust. The formal trust will cost money to set up. They can run you up to $5,000 to set it up. Then there's annual accounting fees, et cetera, et cetera. So here in Canada, we have the ability to have what is known as an informal trust. And the Canada Revenue Agency allows that to exist. So in an informal trust, you still have the three parties. Technically, as soon as you make a deposit, so if I were to deposit money into an informal trust, and so example could be Laurie Soutsos in trust for Alexander Soutsos. My name's not on it, but I'm the contributor. I'm the settler. And so even though there's a custodian's name on the account, the money doesn't belong to the custodian, and the money doesn't belong to the contributor either. Even though it was their money originally, once it goes into the trust account, belongs to the child. So any growth in the value of the investment, let's say it's invested in a stock portfolio, any dividend income that's generated on an annual basis, that is filed on the child's tax return. Of course, the child's not going to have any other income, so it's going to be tax-free effectively. And so you get the tax-free growth anyway. You don't want it in an interest-bearing investment. You'll never have any growth. I don't get parents who do that. I know there are people out there. I know they're probably fearful of the financial markets, so they just want in a bank account, but there's really no point. But once again, whatever interest would be generated from a bank account or a bond, that would be taxed in the hands of the child. So it's tax-free growth effectively until the child starts working and earning a decent amount of income. And the beauty of the in-trust account is that it's not restricted to education. The truth of the matter is that in as much as, when you're a parent, when you're a new parent, and you have these beautiful children, freshly born, and you have all sorts of dreams and hopes for them in the future, and you think they're going to be going to university and graduating at the top of their class. Not everyone is going to be doing that. As a matter of fact, very few are going to be, well, very few will be at the top of their class, but a lot of them may still want to go to post-secondary education. But the other reality is that a large percentage drop out in year 1 and year 2, and not everyone who starts post-secondary education actually finishes. So to be restricted for the use of this money as in an RESP exclusively for post-secondary education is something that you may not want. You may want your kid to be able to get into the trades, and Lord knows we require more tradespeople in this country.
Same in America. Same in America.
Exactly. So your child may want to go into trades. Your child may want to start their own business. They may want to be an entrepreneur. And so the in-trust for account is a lot more flexible. You don't have a bunch of rules and regulations you have to worry about, and grant money and that. And the grant money is nice, but it's not huge. And
it's $7,200 at the end of the day, which is you can make the determination on a subjective basis as to whether or not that is material for most people.
I chose, now the RESP program here in Canada has evolved since it was initially created many years ago, and when my kids were born, it had a lot of restrictions. So I chose at that time just to go within trust for plans. And here in Canada, we've also had an introduction to something called a tax-free savings account in 2009. And so it's a nice transition. Once if you go the route of the in-trust for plan, the money can then be rolled into a tax-free savings account, and then growth from there is tax-free, and the money belongs to the child. So I personally, that's my bias. Although I get the fact that people want the grant money from the government, and they like the RSP, and they all expect their kids to go to university and graduate and become doctors, but not everyone gets to do that.
Yeah, the other thing that you brought it up, and it's a good point, is that the trust money is only belonging to the child. The RESP, technically, the contributors can take that money out. Now, if they were to do that, they have to repay the grant money. They have to pay a tax on it, but they do have the ability to still access the funds in case of emergency, and so that is something that
or in case of relationship deterioration. So, and having been in this business for nearly 40 years, we've come across families where relationships break down between parents and children, and you might get angry and say, well, you know what, that trust account we have for you, we're taking that money back. No, can't do that. Once it's in a trust account, the money technically belongs to the child, and they can do whatever they would like with it, and you have no recourse. And I always explain that up front to people that we set these things up for.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to what you were saying before about university versus, college or trades, I think that's a discussion that's worth having on a larger basis. I think overall we have overemphasized the value of university. We have made it in a way too accessible, if you will, in terms of the cost associated with attending university. And as a result, like you said before, there's a lot of programs that exist that aren't really worth the time and effort that's required in order to complete the degree, and they don't really provide you with any sort of skills or education that is practical and applicable in a work environment. And so as a result, it's not necessarily the best course of action for everybody. I think we've been led to believe that the university is the pinnacle of higher learning, and it's the only thing that people should be striving towards.
I think for Bill and my own, our generation, it was in fact all of that. And I can vouch for the fact that it made a huge difference for me. However, in the last generation, we have found that universities have become very politicized. And so you then begin to question the merits of the whole program.
Yeah.
So the term for university in Greek is all sciences. That's a literal translation, all sciences. So if you were to restrict university to just the sciences, then it truly would be something of significantly higher education. And I don't want to diminish the people who are studying languages and other matters that can benefit from post-secondary education. It's just the point that that was the original structure of universities. It was more focused on a really scientific endeavor, and it's something to consider. I think really the trades are something that I don't think are emphasized enough. First of all, you can make a lot of money being in the trades. And I would argue that after 4 years of being in the trades, you will be earning more money than coming out of university and getting an entry-level position.
Yeah,
and,
for
and
sure.
so,
Well,
so
yeah, no, just to take it back to the point Alex was making. This is a conversation when you have kids. This is a conversation that you should be having, because we sell, to your point, John, colleges or university is sold as some sort of weird magic bullet. If your kid goes to a secondary and gets a secondary education, like at a college or university, they're going to make a whole lot more money and they're going to be better off, which is why we as parents buy into it. But the conversation, especially in the theme of today's podcast, is you should have this conversation, because not all kids should go to college. No, they shouldn't. And I have friends who are trades, who work in the trades, who make really nice money. And it's very stable, very nice money. And they go home at the end of the day. They have time with their families. It gives them a different quality of life than you might have with a job that wouldn't let you do that.
Yeah.
So that, it's a valuable and important conversation to have. Do your kids, should they go to college, or should they look in a different direction, like a trade school?
I
Further
think
to that, Bill. I'm sorry, Dad, just give me 1 sec here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Further to that, aside from the fact that just as a society, we have a lack of people who have the skill set required to do a lot of manual labor jobs, and as a result, it's driving up costs for us, and creating shortages. The other thing to keep in mind is not all children learn the same or learn at the same rate. And I think that's the challenge of trying to, fit a square peg into a round hole with many kids and saying they have to go to university. That may not be for the best for them. They may not have an aptitude towards, education in that sense. They may be more tactile learners, experiential learners, and those people tend to do better in a trades type of environment because it is more honed to their skill set. And most kids, I'm not even going to say, some kids, I would say most kids at 18 years old are not really mature enough to know what they want to do in terms of a university program and have the discipline to perform at a high level within that university program. And so a lot of times the first year or two ends up being wasted on, partying and other social engagements. And then it's only the last 2 years of education that the kids really kind of buckle down and focus on their school. And that's money that's wasted, essentially. It's 2 years where you're spending in the United States, what is it, Bill, $100,000 to go and
it's
60
a
grand
staggering. It is a staggering amount of money. And every time I name a figure, I go look it up, and it's higher. So I'm
Well, let's take a look at the world out there and see who are these billionaires that are financially dominant in society. I would venture to guess, anecdotally, that the majority of them never completed university. They may have begun, but they never completed university. I think Bill Gates is in that group. I think Steve Jobs in that, among those?
Steve Jobs is in that group.
So.
Mark Zuckerberg was in that group.
Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah. And there's lots of them. Carlos Slim, who's a Mexican communications magnate. Lots of people in the world have achieved financial success without the need of a post-secondary education. I think what post-secondary education does it refines your language skills, it refines your writing skills, and it helps you with critical thinking. But one of the drawbacks of formal education is also this emphasis on groupthink. And here's here's an issue, and here's the way you should think about it, and now you need to regurgitate it so we can mark you. That's one of the drawbacks of post-secondary education. I think people need to be able to think on their own and independently. And another good reason why there probably should be a gap between high school and going to any post-secondary education probably should be a good 2-year gap. Let people get into the world, travel a little bit, and mature. And I think that would go a long way toward a better, a more balanced workforce.
That's right. I'd push back on the critical thinking. I think it's more what you said at the end there. A lot of groupthink that happens, and you're right. If you go to university straight out of high school, you have no life experience.
No.
Yeah. How do you know to be critical about certain aspects of things? You don't know any better.
No.
And so you lack that perspective. And so sometimes having that gap can provide people with better perspective and allow them the skills and the tools to then go into university and maybe do better and obtain more, withdraw more from the experience. So anyway, okay, so we'll put a pin in that and say that's about all we can get into for education for the time being. The next major life event that a lot of people have incur and is changing careers, and that's sometimes related to education. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about this, Dad? You know, in your experience, having talked to clients for many decades now, what is the normal process when somebody says to you, you know, I'm thinking of changing careers, or I might want to change jobs, or I might have to?
Yeah, so career changes are sometimes voluntary, and more often they're involuntary. We live in a competitive environment, and in as much as people believe they are entitled to a job for life if they're working for a company, the truth is that's an impossibility, and it's less so today than it was in my generation.
Yes.
There was a time when people would come out of high school, join a company, start at the ground level, become eventually one of the managers or a higher position, retire at 65, get a gold watch, and have a heart attack and die at 67, and that was life. That all changed, and people started changing jobs once, twice, 3 times. Then there was career change, and then with global competition, it became even more difficult. So typically what I've seen is once you get into the 50 to 55 age range, that is a danger zone. And that is when typically you're at the top of the economic ladder in any corporation, just like a highly paid athlete when he becomes a veteran. And management starts to look at the costs and says, you know what, we can get 3 young guys to replace this one old guy making too much money. And so you got to be prepared. And I'm still surprised how often people are not prepared and how they are shocked. They think that the company loves them and needs them, and the company can't exist without them. And the truth is, most of us are replaceable. The vast majority of us are replaceable, especially in a corporate environment. And so you need to be working on your education, whether it's when I say education, I mean your skill set. So you need to devote time to developing your skill set. So you may be in a job and you're doing some kind of administrative managerial work. You need to look at alternative industries and develop an alternative skill set. Maybe in today's world with technology, you may want to look at developing coding,
software engineering,
software, and all those things. And no one likes change. No one wants to be doing something like that. But typically, most people have, I'd say, more than a single interest. So I'm a professional portfolio manager, but I do have other interests. And if you spend a little bit of time exploring your personal interests in other areas, you can develop a skill set in those areas. And that's potentially a second career or something to look at. Or maybe it becomes an entrepreneurial opportunity for you. And so this is very important, is you don't relax and assume that you're going to be in a company for life. You don't assume that the company, even if you are an important person in the company, that you're immune from being replaced. And you need to be constantly working on your skill set. And I think that's really important. And you also have to consider having some money set aside as a buffer in the event that you do go without employment for a few months. And that's important.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about. So, if you're in a situation where it's planned and you just decide, I really don't like my job, I want to do something else. How are you going to manage your cash flows? What would you recommend?
So the general guideline in the financial planning industry is 3 to 6 months of committed expenditures. So you look at your household expenditures and you come up with a number. Let's say for the sake of discussion, that number is $5,000. You should have a minimum of $15,000 in a liquid short-term instrument like a bank account or money market fund they can access very quickly. So the guideline is 3 to 6 months. So that could be anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000. Alternatively, you make sure you want to have a line of credit already set up. So assuming you own a home and you can secure your line of credit with a home, in which case you get a much lower interest rate, the line of credit can act as your emergency buffer. So you can tap into that if you have to for 3 to 6 months. So those are options, or it can be mix and match. You can have 15,000 plus the line of credit, et cetera. So you're covered.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then, I think one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily anticipate, and it's hard to really plan for, is that sometimes there can be a transition or ramp up period. So I'll give the example of myself when I went and I did my MBA. You plan on taking, I can't remember how long my program was. It started in August of 2018. I was supposed to be done in March of 2020. We'll get into that.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, you plan for, I think it was going to be in the neighborhood of 20 months, approximately. So you plan for 20 months of, reduced cash flow. At the time, thankfully, we were living at home with my parents, and so my wife and I were going to be fine regardless. It just meant that I wasn't saving as much towards a down payment for a home, but we had enough to get by on all our major expenses and whatnot, and we were still putting away some money, and then tried to do the calculus as to, okay, what's my income going to be when I graduate? Well, as I mentioned, March 2020, stuff happened. And, as
your income is going to be zero.
Yes, and so as is
congratulations,
often,
your income will be zero.
Yeah, exactly.
God.
I hope you really enjoyed your program. You're at the top of your class. That's great. Here's nothing.
That's great. Now
here's your paper. Here's your paper. Here's your kick in the ass. Yeah. Off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know
what? By the way, here's a free mask.
Yeah,
exactly.
And here. No, but but to make this point and to kind of add an amen to it, I don't know a single person that hasn't been laid off, that hasn't had to have a job change. I don't know anybody, myself included, who hasn't been laid off, rehired. These
stuff happens.
Are events that happen.
Yeah.
And you should, John and Alex, you're right. It's like, just be prepared, because it almost certain you'll be a very, very unique individual if it doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. We always plan for, we try and when we forecast things, that we try and account for all the variables. It's impossible. No matter what, at some point, there is going to be something that you don't expect. And so you have to, set aside or manage your expectations accordingly. I didn't get hired until November of 2020. I didn't start working until January of 2020. So I basically went 3 full years without income. That was a lot longer than I was expecting. And when I did get hired, because of the nature of the pandemic, I came in at a lower level than I should have, which means I was earning significantly less than I had forecast. And so you need to factor these things in, not to say that you should expect for things to go wrong, but you should plan and set aside money accordingly in order to try and provide you with a little bit of buffer and wiggle room in the event that it does.
Yes. Well put.
So, we mentioned line of credit usage. That can be something that that can be used to try and manage, short-term disruptions in your cash flow. The other thing that people can be doing, and this is before they actually make a definitive decision to either go back to school or leave their existing employment, is managing their intellectual capital and their labor capital. You don't have to go to university to get trained, to get skills.
Yep.
There are one of the great things about our world today, and there are lots of things that you can nitpick on and say, they're less than optimal compared to what they were historically. But one of the great things that we have is the abundance of information and the abundance of opportunity to obtain that information through different channels. So you don't necessarily have to go to a university to get educated on finance topics. You don't necessarily have to go to university to get or college to get trained on certain aspects of the trades. One of the incredible things, one of my friends is, he has such an intellectual curiosity. I find it astounding. He has learned how to rebuild a car just on YouTube. He's learned how to renovate his house. Everything from plumbing and electrical work. Now, he did get an electrician and a plumber just to come in and sign off on everything, but he learned how to do all of that online. And it doesn't cost anything.
This is this generation's popular mechanics, hey, Bill?
It is. No, it is exactly right, John. It's exactly
popular
right.
mechanics.
So,
I
But
tell
even more dynamic. Even more dynamic.
Far more dynamic. I tell my son's friends, you don't need to go to university. University of YouTube works really well.
It works amazing. I've done so many repairs on my cars.
So you can find ways to try and, prep yourself in the event that something were to happen. Broaden your horizons, broaden your skill sets. And that's all the last point I wanted to make on that. So I think this is a good point for us to wrap up this episode, and then we can come back with the next episode afterwards.
What are we gonna? What do we look forward to in the next episode?
Well, fun stuff. This is going to be I hope everybody has some Prozacs at
Speaking of change.
Yeah, there's a big change. We're going to talk about divorce, second marriage, and managing declining health. So all topics which are, in some instances a little less and exciting than others, but you know what? Stuff does happen in life, and we got to be prepared for them in case they do.
There's hope in all of those categories, especially in managing health. So we'll get into
There's
it.
more than hope in managing health. There's more than hope in managing health.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, this is great. Guys, before we wrap this up, let me just close out by asking, if someone's listening to the podcast and they're thinking these are the kind of people I would like to have some engagement with and would like to reach out to talk to about my finances and my planning, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Best place is to go to our website, which is medwealth.ca. That's med-wealth.ca.
Beautiful. The other thing you can do if you're listening to this podcast for the first time is just hit the follow button, because then you're a subscriber and you don't have to remember where or when you heard this podcast, because every time they drop a new episode, you'll be notified. You can give it a listen and you won't miss out on anything. And if you like this podcast, I would ask that you share it with other people, review it, tell people about it, share it with them and let them know that you find it beneficial and they might find it interesting as well. Until next time, when we get into some really charming topics, I want to thank you. I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of John and Alex and everybody at MedWealth. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And we will remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's your choice. And use it wisely. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Prescribing Prosperity. Visit our website at med-wealth.ca. That's med-wealth.ca for more information or to connect with us for a consultation. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and their guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of IPC Securities Corporation. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investment advice. Always seek the advice of a qualified and licensed financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment or retirement planning. MedWealth Financial Services can provide a private consultation to help you determine the suitability of any guidance discussed on the show.